Hey everybody, I hope you're having a really great day. Today, I'm joined by Mark Day and Nancy Farrow of HoloAnatomy. HoloAnatomy is a game changer in the realm of medical education, giving access to 3D representations of everything from the endocrine system to bone structures to medical students. This increases retention and time to competency rates. I know you're going to love this episode. Enjoy. Hello, tech friends, and thank you for tuning into Emerging Technologies in Business, where we take a deep dive into different technologies that are impacting businesses today and in the very near future. I'm your host, Brock Riney, and this podcast is brought to you by ConcannonXR. Let's talk tech. Hey everyone, I've got a really special treat today. I'm joined by HoloAnatomy with Mark Day, the CEO, and Nancy Farrow, the Senior VP of Marketing and Global Business Development. They're here to talk to us all about HoloAnatomy. Nancy, Mark, how are you both doing today?
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Brock.
Really appreciate you joining the show, most definitely. And first off, I got to say that this is an incredible way to teach anatomy, in my personal opinion. But for our audience who are unfamiliar with HoloAnatomy, could you give a quick overview of what it is and what it does for us, Mark?
Yeah, just very simply, imagine instead of using a more traditional method of learning human anatomy using cadaveric dissection, which is what you see in most medical schools, instead, we're using sort of a digital equivalent. So if all you want to do is learn the basics of human anatomy or even neuroanatomy, all you have to do is use holographic display. We currently use HoloLens, but you can imagine any mixed reality, HMD or head-mounted display to do the same thing, where we can look at cross sections of any part of the human body.
Wow, so it can really take any part of the human body, not just a full head to toe, but you can zoom in on different parts. And I did read something. Obviously, you're doing this with Case Western, and now you've actually been doing it with multiple institutions. Are you seeing that having those types of abilities and these 3D representations of the human body, are they becoming a deciding factor for students when they're deciding where they're going to go to take these types of college education courses?
Yeah, we're actually presently in about 25 different institutions, so still very much rolling across the U.S. and around the globe. In sort of changing forever the way human anatomy is taught and learned. But we actually have video of students, even from Case Western Reserve, who have said this was a big reason why they joined the School of Medicine at Case. So I think you're going to see more examples of that. And I bet Nancy has a few working examples of it as she gets out and sees most of our customers all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely, Mark. Brock, as Mark mentioned, I keep a close contact with all of our customers, and what they do, they use HoloAnatomy as a marketing tool. We've seen this in students recruitment, in faculty recruitment. We've seen this in commercials, in digital and print collaterals. And we also have seen this in bringing on, showcasing it as for high-ranking officials and donors. So it is a tool that is being used very broadly.
And it makes a lot of sense, right? Nancy, you and I had a conversation before where, I mentioned I went to film and radio television school. And when I was going from high school to college, I went and looked for specific locations that had the tools that I was looking for, that I wanted to learn. And it's the same thing now in the medical community. It really hasn't changed. It's just obviously 20 years later, but who's counting? But really, it does make a big difference for these kids that are coming out of high school. They already know what they want to do. They're levels above us already. And if you're not going to provide the tools that they need, they're going to find a location that will. And I know you mentioned it a little bit there, Mark, about the cadavers, right? So I can see already how this technology pays for itself, right? The ability to remove cadavers out of the medical field, first, they're costly, right? And then there's only an available amount of time that you have to utilize them. And it's kind of a one-shot deal, right? If you're trying to teach someone how to do surgery on a lung, you don't have a bunch of them, right? So having the ability to have a 3D virtualization of it makes a big difference. I guess my question really is, do you think that we're now at a point where we'll no longer use those types of cadavers any longer? And even the old school, like classroom skeleton, are we about to replace those things with these types of 3D changes?
Well, I guess it really depends on what it is that you're trying to learn. For purposes of learning basic human anatomy, you don't need a cadaver. If my medical education or profession leads me to, say, become a dental hygienist, for example, I probably don't need to dig into cadavers on a regular basis in order to get my education. But if I want to become a surgeon, surely you're going to have to dive in there at some point. So what we're trying to do is for any M1, M2, first, second year medical student, or anyone in a medical professional degree program, really even a high school secondary education program, we're trying to teach a whole new paradigm shift that will either remove the need for a cadaver lab entirely, if all we're doing is teaching anatomy, like in a simulation center, or just augment what we've already got. So there is some cost reduction and savings, but the reality is what we got to really look at is the pedagogical outcomes that we're creating. You can learn twice as fast, and you retain that information 40+% longer after being tested on the same material months later. So it's pretty amazing outcome, and that's the real benefit. But the cost savings can be quite significant, particularly if you're thinking about, should I build a new cadaver lab as part of my medical school, or should I just go with a digital equivalent to that in my simulation center?
Makes perfect sense. And, you mentioned it there. I was about to ask you about retainment rates. So I would imagine that this has to be not only a higher retainment rate way of learning, right? It just has to be more efficient in every aspect. Are you also seeing that students who are able to utilize this type of system are not only retaining more, but they're having kind of a faster time to competency? Are they learning at a quicker pace as well?
Well, they are learning at a quicker pace. In fact, there was a preliminary peer review study that was done within Case Western, which revealed that students were actually learning the same subject matter twice as fast. Now, they still got to complete the semester, but it just means they can learn more over that same period of time of other subject areas. But again, if they can retain that information quite a bit longer, 40+% longer, literally being tested 8 months after on the same material, that's pretty significant in terms of the education benefit. Is it creating better clinicians and physicians? We'll see. We're still relatively new at this, but I think we're off to a really important start in getting these kids off to a great education in what is arguably certainly one of the most difficult but most important things they will ever do as part of their medical education.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, if I can just add to it, what we were able to do in 2 hours before HoloAnatomy, purely in dissection, traditional dissection cadaver lab, we're now able to do and add more for students to learn. So now we're able to do a digital HoloAnatomy lab and then learn a particular theme and then replicate it in a radiology and then do exactly the same theme in a standardized living anatomy using standardized patients. So if you notice, what we're doing is we're using and learning the same anatomy theme and then replicating that knowledge in 3 different environments. So the students are learning over and over and over and solidifying that knowledge.
Yeah, and I think that's the big difference, right? So we only have so much throughput that we can do as human beings. There's so many hours in the day. So finding a way to increase that throughput and at the same time continue to hit those big pillars to remind why we're learning these things and why they all come together, that's really where you start to see the puzzle pieces come together, right? That's where you get excited.
Yes, and that's what the difference is. With HoloAnatomy, you're learning, you're understanding, and you're gaining the knowledge versus pure memorization. I took anatomy, and what I did, I memorized. So once I regurgitated that information, after the test, the very next day, if you ask me, I wouldn't remember half of it. But what happens with these students, they understand it, and it's ingrained in their memory. So you ask them 8 months later, they will know the answers.
Yeah, and everybody's a different learner too. And having a visualization makes a big difference, honestly. And okay, so I guess my other question would be, I would assume that courses would really want to reflect only what the pertinent information would be, right? A surgeon is going to have no need to want to learn about the skin disease or something like that. So there's got to be some sort of tool that can give to customize HoloAnatomy. Is that something that's available currently?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's part of the whole experience. You have the immersive experience of actually seeing a three-dimensional hologram of the human anatomy, but just as importantly is to build the lesson plan or build the lab manual. And you do that step by step, just like you would in, say, PowerPoint. And you can literally pull down different anatomical objects. You can use different reference pieces of information, a PDF or some other learning tool supplementary to the experience, and you can pull all that together and you sequence exactly what you want the student to learn. You keep everybody on track. You can have students learning different parts of different functions of human anatomy. And most importantly, for any of these sort of aggregated experiences with all the students or different students in the same classroom learning different things, it's all teacher-led, so it's all faculty-led. But it's also it sort of really encourages the collaborative aspect of what we're doing here. Clinicians and academic professionals at Case will tell you at Case Western, learning human anatomy is a team sport. So to Nancy's point, it's not just memorizing where students fall down, but it's also you're much more likely to remember things if you're having a shared experience and you're learning about what somebody else is observing, and you're taking that feedback into your own sort of observation and understanding what's going on. So the quality of learning in this experience is second to none, like nothing students have ever imagined. And even though we have, certainly we see the best and the brightest digital natives who come in and expect this type of immensely cool technology, it's actually helping them learn faster and learn better.
And part of this suite is this designer tool software. And that's part of my job is I go out there when I onboard our partners, we train them how to use this amazing software where they're able to select what they want to show to their students and how to create the content. We have 9,000 anatomical art assets that's part of their library. So they can select anything they want from the tiniest blood vessel to the largest bone. So you can imagine, Brock.
Absolutely. That is super cool. Mark, one of the things you just sent right there, you were saying about how we're having a shared experience, right? And I think that is something where COVID accelerated, where we're all a little bit further apart than we were before. And we're losing that water cooler talk that is that sense of collective failure a little bit, right? So I think one of my questions is, with the HoloAnatomy software, are users able to join those types of classes remotely? And then for those who are participating in person, what does that look like for those that do join remotely, if that's possible?
It is possible, which is the coolest thing about it. In fact, one of the, I guess, important areas of learning around the power of this innovation and the power of this tool is that it worked really, really well during COVID, where students couldn't come into the classroom. We had students at home. We could have students anywhere in the world. All I need is a Wi-Fi connection and an internet connection, and I can do anything. And we can all be together in the same classroom, or we can be in different parts of the universe, and we can see the same thing. We can look at what each other is looking at directly from the same vantage point. And we can annotate those experiences as well, so that I can see what you were talking about, when you were talking about, where you see it. So it's a great in-person tool, so you can still have that human experience, that analog conversation, just mouth to mouth there. But it's also an important digital tool, which is the next best thing in being there. So that collaborative experience really doesn't diminish by virtue of the fact that we sometimes have to do it digitally. Pardon me.
Brock, just to give you an idea of what happened during COVID, when I don't have to remind you, when COVID happened, our students went on break, spring break. And when they came back, we made an immediate decision to purchase 184 HoloLenses. We shipped those right away to all of our students. And our students did not miss a single day of anatomy class. We went from Case Western remotely immediately. We trained them how to operate, how to create their space anchors, and it was flawless. So, and we are the only software that can have over 100 users in one synchronous connection, shared experience. And that's really what we're very proud of.
That's awesome. So that completely takes away that lost water cooler talking, especially during COVID. It just sounds like you didn't miss a beat in any, but that also explains why you went from, one school to 25 as quickly as you did. Everyone else figured out the secret sauce pretty quickly. So I guess the last question I have is for students and doctors that have been trained on reading and interpreting 2D images for the last decade, multiple decades, millennia, for a long time now, right? How do you see this changing? How this is going to impact the medical community and society and students in general?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that is the fundamental reason why I got so excited to join Illumis as a CEO, and watching the work that Dr. Griswold and Sue Wishbaratz and Aaron Henninger did at Case Western Interactive Commons and building the app. And then watching Nancy just walk it into all these universities. Their stories are just so impactful, and what the transformational way in which students are learning that is permanently changed. We see this as a fundamental paradigm shift in the way learning is being achieved. It's what we call sort of the next wave of ubiquitous computing, if we think about mainframe to mobile to PC to this. And so as a learning tool, there's really simply nothing better. Interestingly, though, we watched a lot of these students who worry about the technology being a distraction, and more commonly you worry about faculty, where the technology becomes a distraction and getting in the way of the learning. It's accelerating that experience where it's no longer a distraction. So our universities or even secondary educational programs, are they going to take a step backwards to the days in which, say, anatomy was taught since really the same way since Da Vinci? I don't think so.
I don't think
we're
so
on
either.
to something fundamentally different. And our proof point is watching clinicians or academic professionals from some of the top medical colleges in the world come into the interactive commons of Case Western and actually see where, say, the diaphragm is actually placed within the human body as a perfect anatomical reference standard. We've even had clinicians tell us that can't be right. Let me show you the data. Let me show you the data in 3D. And they're like, wow, I didn't know that. In my 40 years of practicing medicine, I didn't really understand exactly where that placement was. Or for the first time, being able to see the lymphatic system in 3D, which you can't even see in a cadaver. So yeah, needless to say, we're pretty impressed and pretty proud of the work that Case Western has done to date. I'm extremely proud of the work that Nancy's done in trying to illuminate the possibilities of new learning, no pun intended. Nancy, you probably have more direct anecdotes on this.
No, I think you've done a phenomenal job summarizing. It's just amazing to see when students are able to see details that they're just not able to see in a cadaver. It's amazing to see when they respond to me and say, wow, it's great when you see things in 3D in the proper spatial relationship. So it's very satisfying.
And what's fun is we're just at the very beginning of this new adoption, right? So imagine this. So even if you're in 25 different schools now, how many different doctors and practitioners have you now released into the world that will then scheme themselves into more and more and more, because they're going to go find two friends and so on and so forth. You're changing the way the medical community is going to accept medicine and what our expectations are long term. I think that's a big deal. If you have the ability to go have multiple medical professionals who can just pop on a HoloLens, and if one's in Denmark and one's in Australia and one's in California, they can all look at the same exact image and give their medical opinion in real time. That's changing humanity. That's changing how we're handling the medical world, how we're teaching it, and that's going to just make our lives better. So I am nothing but pumped, y'all. I am super, super excited to see y'all's growth as we go forward. But to change subjects and have a little bit of fun with you, because I can't help myself, and I'm sorry, I have to do it. I need one of you to tell me, if there is one piece of technology that you can get rid of in this world, what would it be and why?
You want to go first, Nancy?
No, I'm going to let you do that.
All right, Mark, you're up.
Well, I have a lot of ideas about this as one who's, not to date myself, but one who's grown through a lot of obsolescence with technology. But I guess one of the things that still bothers me today is the keyboard. When can we just do away with the keyboard? It's obnoxious. I learned to type literally on a typewriter, yes, to date myself.
And that's not obnoxious at all.
It's such an unnatural act to follow this QWERTY stuff. But the other thing too that and that's more benign, but I guess more controversially, there is a place and time and use and medium for social media. This is a good example of how we might use the benefits of social media. But so often human context loses context the minute it goes over the open waves, and civility and so on. We know that the stories of these terrible outcomes, but I wish that, I hope, I should say, that we're learning to become better citizens in the world through watching what social media can do that is destructive. So misinformation and so on. So Brock, here's to you to try to keep the record straight and keep people truthful to the word of what's really going on in the world, even as it relates to the metaverse. Thank you.
My grandmother used to tell me something a long time ago when I was a kid. She would say, Brock, just because you have a thought in your head doesn't mean that everybody else needs to hear it. And I think that holds pretty true in social media these days. A lot of the times before you post that thing, it's really not all that necessary. Use it for facts. That's unfortunate. We have gotten into a place in our culture where it's hard to tell what's true and what's not anymore without having to go to multiple different sources to fact check things, which is unfortunate. It's such a time waste. But either way, Nancy, Mark, thank you both for being here. Thank you for giving my audience and our audience a little bit of insight about HoloAnatomy. If our listeners wanted to learn more, where would you point them? And if they wanted to get in touch with you, how would they get in touch with you?
I think the simplest thing would just be to go to our website. It does have a deliberately peculiar spelling. It's just ILUMIS-AR.com. So lots of ways to probably misspell that, but invariably, hopefully you'll get redirected properly. And then to reach out to us, just nancy.farrow, Farrow, or mark.day@illumis-ar.com. And follow us on LinkedIn. Just type in Illumis. You'll see us pop up in the list. And that's where we predominantly post a lot of big news from our customers and the things that they're doing. So to read all about our stories, the other thing you can do is go out to HoloAnatomy. HoloAnatomy is what we're best known for. That's the application. If you go out and type in HoloAnatomy in YouTube, you're going to see dozens of great videos from our customers, from Case Western, from lecturers, from Nancy, from a lot of other people who've done a lot of great work using the app. So go out to holoanatomy.com. That's another way to look at us.
Really appreciate that. Well, I'll tell you, I really appreciate your time. And I do also want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor of our podcast. I want to do it to keep our stuff going here. So I do want to thank ConcannonXR. XR is flat out the future. And if you are working in the XR world, or you're looking to step in the world of XR, Concannon is here to help bring your XR dreams into a reality. Regardless if you're developing your own XR application or if you're looking for a helping hand to take an idea to that next level, Concannon is here to help. Reach out to ConcannonXR by emailing them at inquire@ConcannonXR.com. And of course, you can find our podcasts on social media as well, at ETIB Podcasts. And if you like this episode, make sure to like this episode and subscribe it on YouTube, and check out one of these other videos that'll pop up here on YouTube here in a second. And of course, that's going to do it for today. Thanks to Nancy. Thanks to Mark for being here. I've been your host, Brock Riney. We're going to talk some more emerging tech next time. Bye, everybody.